Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Audit Committee meeting. We've got two items on the agenda. The first one, our 2017 audited financial statements, and then our second quarter audit status report. So we'll begin with item number one, and Sherry, welcome. Myself off, but lectern, hang on, here we go. Go ahead. No, you were on.
Sounds like it's working now.
There you go, okay.
All right, as I said, for those that might not have heard, I'm here to present the 2017 annual financial report. The format of the presentation will be as follows. First, I will provide a bit of a background to allow for a better understanding of the consolidated financial statements. I will then provide a high-level overview of the city's financial condition. After that, Matt Beddick from KPMG will present the findings of their audit. For your reference, explanations for significant variances for the 2017 consolidated financial results have been included in the financial statement discussion and analysis section of the annual financial report starting on page 10. The consolidated financial statements being presented today combine the results of the tax-based operations, the various city enterprises, local boards, capital activity, and reserve fund activity. They also account for the two government business enterprises, Kitchener Power Corp and Kitchener Generation Corporation. Local boards include the Centre in the Square, Kitchener Public Library, Belmont Improvement Area, and the Kitchener Downtown Improvement Area. There are 4 individual statements within the consolidated financial statements, plus a number of notes providing additional details. The statements are first...
Sherry, just one sec. Are your screens not on? I think they're probably just off and they weren't turned on, so if you just hit the power button in the corner, that should... Is that good? Okay, awesome. Sorry, you can continue.
Sorry. So the first of the statements is the consolidated statement of financial position, and this is often referred to as a balance sheet. Second is the consolidated statement of operations, which is often referred to as an income statement. The third is the consolidated statement of change in net financial assets. Fourth is the statement of cash flows. The statement of financial position is used to evaluate the city's ability to meet its financial obligations. It documents cash resources, financial assets, things like investments and receivables, liabilities or amounts that the city owes to others, and non-financial assets. These are items held for purposes of providing future services. It also presents the overall accumulated surplus. The statement of operation reports the revenue collected by the city, the cost of providing municipal services, and the resulting annual surplus or deficit. The statement of change in net financial assets explains the difference between the municipality's annual surplus or deficit and the change in net financial assets for the year. The statement of cash flows reports changes in cash and cash equivalents resulting from operating, capital, investing, and financing activities. It shows how the city financed its activities and met its cash requirements for the year. The format of the financial report presented to Council in March for the tax-based and enterprise operating results is significantly different than the format required for the annual audited consolidated financial statements. These 2 slides are designed to help walk you through the difference between the annual surplus on the statement of operation in these consolidated financial statements compared to the operating results that were provided to you in March. The amount presented in March was $6.4 million compared to $52.8 million presented today. The consolidated statements contain the operations and entities that I listed out previously. Further adjustments are then made to these combined results to have them reported in line with standards set out by the Canadian Chartered Professional Accountants Public Sector Accounting Board, or PSAB. The largest adjustments required to comply with PSAB relate to the city's tangible capital assets, or TCA. The Statement of Operations includes the revenue streams that were used to fund the creation of assets and the annual amortization of these assets over their useful lives. The expenses incurred to build or purchase the assets are excluded from the Statement of Operations, but rather are included as assets on the Statement of Financial Position. Transfers from operations to capital or reserve funds and transfers from capital or reserve funds are removed in the consolidation, as these are an expense in one fund and a revenue in the other. Given the consolidated financial statements are adding all funds together, these expenses and revenues offset. Another significant PSAB adjustment involves the treatment of debt repayments. Both interest and principal are treated as an expense in the operating results, whereby PSAB only allows for the interest to be expensed. The accumulated surplus of $1.34 billion reported on the consolidated statement of financial position is not a surplus as you'd be used to hearing in regards to operating results. These are not dollars available to be spent. They are a representation of past investments that the city has made that continue to provide benefit going forward. This includes things like tangible capital assets, investment in Kitchener Generation Corporation and Kitchener Power Corp, and reserve funds set aside for specific purposes. To clarify, investments in tangible capital assets makes up $1.11 billion of the total $1.34 billion in accumulated surplus. This in turn is made up of thousands of individual assets that will continue to provide benefit to the city for a number of years. In the previous slides, we saw that the largest impact on surplus are those related to tangible capital assets. The net book value of TCA, which is the cost less the accumulated amortization to date, has experienced modest growth over the last 5 years. With the exception of 2015, each year the net acquisitions, or additions less disposals, have exceeded the amortization expense applied in that year. The key on this slide is the net book value as a percentage of costs has remained steady at around 68%. If this percentage was dropping significantly, it would suggest that the city should look at its asset renewal programs. The next few slides will present a high-level overview of the financial condition of the city. Financial condition speaks to the city's ability to finance its operations on an ongoing basis, regardless of economic changes and changes in other environmental factors, such as growth within the city. The chart shown here displays the 5-year trend in the overall debt balances for the city, broken down between the various types of debt. The municipal debt continues to decrease from its peak of $112 million in 2013. 2013 was the last year new debt was taken on for the EDIF program. Debt balances are expected to decrease for the next number of years as the EDIF debt continues to be repaid. This chart shows the 5-year trend in the consolidated reserve balances. This graph includes all reserve funds except for those that are classified as obligatory reserve funds. These ones appear as liabilities on the city's statement of financial position. As can be seen in the graph, the balance has been increasing since 2013. Council passed a consolidated reserve policy in 2012, which provides a framework for building up reserve balances and ensuring that they are used as intended. The next couple of slides will provide a bit more detail about the various types of reserves and their balances compared to their target levels. One of the components of the reserve fund policy was creating categories for improved reporting. The 5 categories shown on the slide are used during budget discussions, and the next slide shows the 2017 closing balance with regards to each of these categories. So the top line of this chart shows the actual 2017 ending balances for each of the 5 reserve categories. The middle section shows the target ranges for the reserve categories and how well these reserves meet their minimum target. The bottom section shows the actual 2016 ending balances by reserve category and the change between the 2 years. I would now like to draw your attention to the far right column labeled Total Reserves. Here you can see that the total ending reserve balance in 2017 was $63.1 million, which is 60% of the minimum target balance of $104 million. This ending reserve balance is down slightly from $64.6 million at the end of 2016. This chart groups all similar reserves into one category and calculates the percentage of the minimum for the full category. There are certain reserves in a category that would be funded above their minimum target that are offsetting those that are below their minimum target. To ensure every individual reserve met its minimum target balance, an additional $73.8 million would be needed to be added to the reserves. So, although there wasn't a significant draw on reserve balances in the current year, the city is far from being in line with even its minimum target reserve balance, and the percentage of the minimum target has fallen from the previous year. Some improvements have been made in increasing the stabilization reserves and the corporate reserves, but these continue to be well below their recommended minimum targets. This exposes the city to various risk factors, only one of which is weather volatility. This graph combines the city debt and reserve positions together. Rating agencies consider a debt-to-reserve ratio of 1:1 to be financially prudent, which means that the city would have to have $1 in reserve for every $1 it holds in debt. As can be seen in the chart to the right, the listed comparator municipalities all hold more in reserves than they do in debt, with the exception of Waterloo and St. Catharines. The city's reserve ratio is about the same as that of Waterloo and about 4 times that of Cambridge. At the end of 2017, the city has $1.28 in debt for every dollar in reserve. This shows much improvement from the 2013's balance of $3 in debt for every dollar in reserve. The magnitude of the city's debt load can largely be attributed to EDIF and was known before the 10-year program began. The final financial measure to be presented today is also the most complete picture of the city's financial health. Financial position per capita is determined by subtracting total liabilities from total financial assets and dividing by the population. This measure shows that the city has enough cash and investments available to pay everything it owes to others, including its debt. Looking at the chart to the right, the value of $918 in 2016 is positive, which means that Kitchener has more than enough assets to meet its obligations. It is also slightly above both the average and the median for this sample. Finally, as shown in the graph to the left, Kitchener has kept a fairly steady position over the last 5 years, which shows that even though debt levels have been high, the city is not in financial peril. Of note, the graph is showing a drop in 2017, but this decline is only due to the inconsistent data sources for population statistics. 2017's calculation uses the population provided by the Planning, Housing and Community Service Department at the region of Waterloo, and that for 2017 is just over 252,000, whereby the BMA study uses the 2016 Statistics Canada census population of just over 233,000. The city's financial position is getting increasingly better. This trend will continue, provided the city limits new debt issuance to what is already planned for in the 10-year capital forecast and allows debt levels to fall as the EDIF debt matures. In order to enhance the financial position, the city can continue to build reserve balances. Council is encouraged not to draw on existing balances for uses other than what the reserve was created for, and to continue making strides to see reserve levels brought up to at least their minimum targets. Continuing to hold long-term investments provides investment income and cash flows year over year and benefits the city's net asset position. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. If there's no questions at this time, I'll turn things over to Matt Beddick from KPMG.
Okay, we do have several councillors with questions, and we'll start with Councillor Marsh.
Thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. Just one is regarding on page 115, you mentioned about this chart referencing only obligatory reserve funds rather than all of our reserve funds, and I'm just wondering if you can explain a little further the difference between all of them and the obligatory ones.
Yeah, certain of our reserves need to be reported on the balance sheet as deferred revenue, and these include the obligatory reserves for development charges, parkland.
It's right here. Okay. Yeah, you've got a note there.
And one other one that's drawing a blank on me.
Yeah, it's here. Okay. On the next page, it just didn't seem like a big difference, but I guess it's $2 million difference, but am I right in saying that? Is that between 63 and 61?
Those between 63 and 61?
You have a note on...
Yes, sorry. Yeah, it is right there on the bottom of the slide. I apologize.
That's fine. Okay, thanks. And then I don't know if you have any details to explain to us about the Center in the Squares $3,500,000 surplus.
I didn't get details on their surplus in the given year. We can reach out to them and get some more information.
Or maybe our staff would have, and I'll ask later. That's fine. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, just a very quick question. In one of the slides, you had said that one of the objectives is to retain long-term investments. And are we including investments like Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, our shares in that, as well as our gas utility? That would be considered as a long-term investment, correct?
Both of those, yes.
Okay. And the other thing is to reduce debt. One of the graphs showed 2013 we had 112 million in debt, and in 2017 it was 78. So we paid roughly 34 million in that period. So, and we're able to achieve that not because we're adding on additional taxes, but those increments of tax increase in previous years, almost 10 years ago, are what's helping to pay down this debt, and will continue to pay down the debt even if we were to do nothing else. The debt will continue to come lower. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay, excellent. Just wanted to reconfirm that fact.
Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. Just looking at the debt to reserve ratio on page 1-21, and you said that our debt is starting to come down, which we had anticipated. At what point would we, if we were to consider to take on more debt, what would we need to be at before we would take on additional debt?
There's a lot of factors that would need to be considered before the city would decide to take on new debt. We are expecting in 2018 that the debt to reserve ratio will be at the 1-to-1 ratio that is the kind of going rate, but as you can see in the comparators, most municipalities don't necessarily plan to keep their debt above that level.
Okay. So the factors wouldn't just be the 1-to-1. There would be what kind of debt would we be taking on and the interest rate at the time.
And the impact to future taxes to repay that debt, et cetera.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Councillor Davey was next, but I clicked on Councillor Gazzola first. So, okay, Councillor Davey, let's try this again. There we go. Okay.
Okay, there we go.
And
Thank you.
Sorry,
just to follow up actually to Councillor Singh's question, looking at the, oops, I lost my page. The chart, the financial position per capita, I think it's 122. Does this chart, where it shows that we're at $918, does this graph in this figure specifically include the value of our gas and hydro utilities?
Gas there isn't a dollar value associated with an investment, but gas is part of the overall city operations, so it is technically included in there. For the investment in KW Hydro, it would in fact be an investment that is included in our assets.
So the value of that is included. Okay, great, thank you.
Is that it? Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions on our assets, and I'm on page 22. So I'm not sure if this is the time or. And there was some explanation, but I'm just questioning. I'm 2 or 3 items. I think it was other receivables. There's a 54% increase in other receivables, which seems a large amount. And you state that it's got something to do with natural gas receivables would have increased because rates went up. The rates didn't go up by 54%. So
No.
what else is in there? That's all. It's not a good sign to see increasing receivables.
So included in there is gas being up due to the colder start to the winter season, due to the introduction of carbon tax credits. So that is part of what we're billing as well that wouldn't have been part of our billing in 2016. The other utility receivables, water, sanitary, and storm, are also included in that line. So those also individually had significant increases in rates from 2016. And then the other component is there are some receivables from the region and school boards due to tax adjustments, whereby they are typically in a payable balance at year end.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on that. Why are they, by the year end, I thought your accounts with the school board and that are all cleared up. They're cleared up substantially before the year end. So I don't understand what's...
In 2017, the ARB has been working to clear a backlog of appeals. So a lot of that came in late in the year, and those adjustments would flow through, and the dollars would be trued up in early January or February.
So those are amounts that people have overpaid, and you've already paid the money to the school boards in the region, and you've got it coming back.
That's correct.
Is it that substantial?
All of those factors are coming in to lead to the 50% increase over last year. I'm not exactly sure on what the dollar amount related to the region.
Can you tell me what the utilities? Can you tell me what the gas utility receivables were? Just that one item, or not?
Off the top of my head, I wouldn't have that, but I can get that for you.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, the other area is inventory. Inventory's gone up 83%. We got bad inventory there, or what?
No, the increase there is primarily related to, we have approximately $6 million in carbon tax credits that were purchased before the end of 2017 that would apply to gas sales in 2018. So we had pre-purchased those, and now we can apply them against the revenues earned to date in 2018.
All right, so they're sort of like a prepaid expense maybe too. Okay, as
Correct.
opposed to, I was concerned about it. We got a lot of old inventory here, but that's a different issue. Okay, and the last one is deferred revenue. What's happened there? It's up 200%.
The deferred revenue other, is that what you said? Sorry. I didn't-
Yes.
There is nearly $10 million in credits for services funds taken in within 2017, specifically related to Blair Creek Bridge and Strasburg Road North. So that's where the developers
Have paid down that money already, and we haven't done anything. Okay. Is that the substantial portion of it?
Yes, that would be the lion's share of the increase.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
I do have the utilities receivables specifically were up $4.2 million compared to the prior year.
What? I don't have that figure. What is the other receivables? How much is it?
So there is There's brownfield receivables, there's grants included in the trade and other receivables, there's...
It's okay, I meant what are the total of all the other receivables? I'll find it.
Yeah, we've got 43.4 million compared to 28.8
Yeah, so
million.
4 million of it is for gas.
Of that increase, yeah.
Yeah, so the rest of it is for other areas then.
Yeah.
Still a large figure, okay.
The region and school boards is, again, another 2.7 million.
Okay.
And some grants related to clean water were 2.7 million. As well as an LRT accrual at year end as well, almost 2 million as well.
Yeah, because there's a $15 million difference, so, okay. All right, thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, very quickly, and from Councillor Davies' question arose more questions in my mind, and staff can determine if my question would be more suited in camera and answer accordingly. Could council give directions to staff to establish a value to our gas utility? You said that we haven't established a value to it, and that's why it's not included in our calculations. And this question keeps to be asked every year whenever these financial reports do come, to finally put that to rest. Is that something that can be done, or is it even feasible?
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, yes, it has been done. There was a valuation, I believe, maybe 4 or 5 years ago that was performed by KPMG. That said, it cannot be included in the financial statements per accounting principles. So we have a market valuation for the utility, but there would be no way to actually incorporate that into the audited financial results.
Could be very least include that in the report itself, not including the calculation, but showing that we have this asset, and as of 2014, that valuation of that asset was the set amount.
I suppose we could adjust the calculation. I think that would be a decision for council whether or not a market valuation, which goes to our competitive interest, is something that you would want to disclose publicly.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask. So, okay. So it's a conversation for later.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Fernandez? Oops. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Gazzoldis questions around the deferred revenue and the credit for service. I know I've asked this question sort of in a different way in the past. Where does that put us in with a financial statement if we have those outstanding credits, if we don't have the revenue to pay them back?
Those currently sit on as a liability on our balance sheet. Mm-hmm. So until such time as the developers come along and are introducing future development charges, we would earn those funds back through the development charges. Otherwise, if at the end of an extended period of time they haven't brought on enough new development to offset those costs, then I'm not positive that these ones would actually be paid back in cash. There's some that are paid back in cash and others that were just meant to be recovered through future development charges.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that appears to be all the questions. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Chair, I'll just go back to answer Councillor Marsh's question about the centre and the square. So if you refer to the Green Financial Report, page 78, so much like the city, the centre and the square on a cash basis had a modest operating surplus. I believe it was in the low few $100,000 this year, and the city received half of that. What you see here is a surplus that's stated based on accounting principles, which include adjustments for capital assets. So if you look at the fifth line down under revenue, you can see a grant from the City of Kitchener for capital, $3.2 million. And if you compare that to the right column from 2016, it was only $219,000. So there's an extra $3 million of capital grants in 2017. But the only expenses associated with that is the third line up from the bottom under expenses, amortization. So while they were given a substantial amount for capital, primarily for roofing and other projects, the costs only flow through as amortization or depreciation over time, and so that results this year in what appears to be a large surplus. In fact, they've spent more than that on their capital assets. They can only expense the amortization.
Okay. So with that, I think it's time for our auditors. Mr. Beddick, welcome.
Thank you. And thanks to Sherry for her presentation as well. So I'll take a few moments to go through the KPMG report that's in your packet. I guess I'll wait for it to come up on screen. Thanks for stopping the clock on me too. That constant source of stress when that thing's going.
Don't worry. We'll be easy on you.
Well, okay, so I will flip to our executive summary, and then I'll walk through some of the details of the report. So you'll recall that we were before this committee in the fall of 2017 and presented our audit plan. We can report that there weren't any significant changes from that plan that was previously reported. I want to remind the committee that in addition to the audit of the financial statements or on a non-consolidated basis here at the city, we are also the auditors for many of the consolidated entities as well and have already separately reported to those governance committees. The one entity that we do not provide an audit opinion on, and it's certainly not required, is the Kitchener Generation Company. In your financial statement package on the consolidated financial statements, you will see a draft of our auditor's report for the 2017 financial statements. It is a clean audit report. There are no qualifications or modifications to that report, which is a good thing. We also prepare a special purpose report with respect to the revenues and expenses of the Gasworks utility, and that is also a clean audit report, but solely for that statement of revenues and expenses. In terms of finalizing our audit, we identify a handful of bullet points here which are typical for this stage in the process. The statements are still in draft, and our audit report is still in draft because we require the committee or council to approve the financial statements prior to us issuing our final opinion. Having said that, all we have to do is complete the process here, ensure that that approval is met. We did identify on this report at the time of its publication that we were awaiting for the receipt of certain legal letters. So these are inquiries that we make with the city's external counsel with respect to potential litigation and claims. We do have all of that communication back now, and it has not resulted in any adjustments. The final thing with respect to this slide I would like to draw your attention to is in the right-hand column in the second section, the control and other observations. We are required to identify and report any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in internal control. And I'm happy to report that we found neither of those during our work this year. As we move on to the next page, you will recall that we are required to discuss the risk of fraud in the conduct of a financial statement audit. And when we talk about the risk of fraud in a financial statement audit, we're generally referring to the intentional manipulation of the accounting records that roll up to the financial statements that you see. We are not looking at, or what's out of scope might be potential situations where the city is a victim of fraud from external sources. We assess the level of fraud risk at the lowest it could possibly be within the audit standards that we have available to us. However, we still are required to respond to those risks. And the primary response is an examination of what we refer to as high-risk journal entries. So what we will do is we will actually get the detailed data for the year from the city. We will establish what we refer to as high-risk criteria and filter that data to identify entries or journal entries or adjustments that meet that criteria. And where we do identify entries that have met the criteria, we will examine those on an individual basis to make sure there was nothing untoward going on. Again, happy to report, based on our testing, we did not find anything that caused us even the slightest bit of concern. Talked briefly in the previous presentation about obligatory reserve funds revenue and deferred revenue, and specifically the risk that we identified previously was with respect to the development charge revenue. As you are likely, quite aware, development charges, are collected in advance from a developer prior to taking on their building permits. We also know that the development costs incurred by the city will often follow a different pattern than how the DCs are collected. The accounting standards require that you will show as deferred revenue any amounts that you collect in advance until such time as you spend that money. And you'll see in the financial statement notes that this is a fairly substantial balance. We believe there's a risk of error in these accounts simply because there are two separate processes for collecting and recording the development charges and a separate process for making the appropriate expenditures on development. As well, there's also a risk that the DCs could be recognized as revenue for, I'll call it, non-development related expenditures. And so we've designed a variety of tests which we've outlined here to mitigate that risk, and we didn't find any errors or omissions. Secondly, during the year, we identified, or was identified to us, the system conversion from Class to ActiveNet. So this is the system that generally manages the recreation activities, rentals and bookings at arenas and hockey rinks and the like. And whenever something like this happens and it has an impact to the financial records, we are required to test that conversion to make sure data has been migrated properly, as well as gain a new understanding of the processes and controls that the new system utilizes. And like I said in the bottom comment here, there were no misstatements or deficiencies identified as a result of our work. On the following page, we identify two areas of what we refer to as critical accounting estimates in the financial statements. So these are areas in the statements that are subject to complex or high degree of estimation in their establishment of the accounts. The first, and we've talked about this at several times in the past, is the accounting for employee future benefits. And these are outlined in the notes to your financial statements, but generally are comprised of three separate areas. There are benefits, early retirement benefits that are offered to employees prior to turning 65, but after they retire, so long as they meet certain criteria. There are sick leave benefits, those primarily which employees earn while they're working and can be taken as time off if they are ill. And there's also the WSIB benefits, which are fairly self-explanatory. We do use the work of the city's independent actuary in establishing and auditing these balances. We do not re-perform the actuarial calculations that they perform, which are based on a variety of assumptions and established actuary models. However, we do test the population that they have. So the actuaries are given information about employee data, the types of employees, what departments they work in, age, gender, and the like, and we test that data to make sure they're receiving the proper amounts of information. As well, we do look at the assumptions that they make in conducting their work, compare that to our own predetermined assumptions. This would be for inflation, discount rates, other matters like that, and we've concurred with the assumptions that they've used there. You will also recall a couple of years ago the city was required to adopt the accounting standard for contaminated sites, and this could be a very large number, or in the city of Kitchener's case a very small number, depending on what properties fall within scope. We were involved on a detailed level when that accounting standard was implemented a few years ago, and we continue to refresh our understanding and make sure that any new activity is properly captured. We've been through that, and we agree that there is no amount for a liability to be recorded at this time. Just as I sort of close the next couple of pages, just some required communications that we have from KPMG to the committee here. The financial statements that you have, because we're issuing a clean audit opinion, we agree that their form and content are appropriate for the size and scope and industry segment for the city. As well, there are no future accounting policies or accounting policy changes that are going to have an immediate impact. There are a handful that are coming down the pipe in a few years, but at this time, everything's okay. And then on the next page, we do identify our comments with respect to adjustments and differences. So based on the work that we performed, we did not identify anything that required adjustment in the financial statements. So in other words, the statements that we got are the statements that you've received, and there were no corrections as a result of our work. We did identify a handful of, I'll call it fairly trivial items that were not corrected, but those are well below the level of materiality that's been set for our audit of the financial statements. So just in closing, I'd like to take this chance to thank the city staff here and their whole team for the work and assistance that they provide in helping us do our work. It's impossible to conduct a proper audit without significant cooperation and preparation from city staff, and we got excellent preparation and cooperation, so we thank them for that. So to the chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Beddick. And we do have some questions, starting with Councillor Gazzola.
You said something about Kitchener Generation at the start of your talk. I missed what you said. What did you say?
That is the one entity under the city's umbrella that we do not do a separate standalone audit for.
Because of the size of it, or?
Because of the size of it, and there's no statutory requirement for it either.
Okay. I was concerned about the WSIB. A couple of years ago, we had all kinds of bells and whistles going off, and there was a lot of discussion about where we stand on that. Are we now clear on that? Are we within our control of that, or?
Well, we're confident with the accounting for it. There's how the WSIB program is managed is sort of separate and outside of the scope of our work. But there were a lot of changes in what costs were going to be covered under the program, and I think that was part of the concerns that were raised at that time.
Well, and we were relying on actuarial reports. Are we happy with where we are at now?
Again, in terms of the accounting as it's presented in here, yes.
What other concerns could there be other than the accounting?
Whether there's enough, whether there's a reserve to cover the future costs, how the city has planned for the funding of those liabilities in the future, which isn't addressed in these financial statements. These statements really only report what the liability is. Doesn't talk about the funding mechanisms in satisfying that liability in the future.
But it does recognize a liability.
Yes.
Okay, so at least. Okay. The other question I was concerned was our contaminated sites. What do you report on there? I was surprised to see there's nothing there, and yet it's public knowledge that there are a number of sites in the community that were former sites and could have contamination. So how does that come into play?
So the scoping on that is fairly strict. So first, it has to be a site that is no longer in active use. So you may have locations and properties around the city that have contamination on them, but if you're still using them for their stated purpose, then those properties would be scoped out of the standard. As well, there may be some contamination there, but if there's not a legal or regulatory requirement to clean that up at this time, again, that wouldn't have a cost or an obligation attached to it.
Okay, so is it only contaminated sites that we own?
Correct.
Yeah, if there's a contaminated site that a private individual or corporation, whether they're around or not, own, we're not liable at this point for that.
That's accurate.
Yeah. Okay. Just one final question. It comes from my. I don't know how the general public understand these statements. I know the accountants like it now because it's, according to these accounting principles, means a lot of things, but do the federal and provincial governments use the same basis of accounting?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, no, when you tell our taxpayers we've got $1.3 billion surplus, when all the other levels of government have a much different figure, it's hard to not give our constituents everything they want. That's just a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola.
We'll have coffee someday, and we'll talk about the merits and challenges with that.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola asked my question with WSIB, but I'd be happy to move this at the appropriate time.
Okay. Well, there don't appear to be any other questions, so I will take your motion then. Councillor Davey, any discussion? Did you want to?
Just briefly, this is another great financial report and audit coming to the City of Kitchener, and again, I'd like to acknowledge the strong financial team we have at the City of Kitchener. We've come to expect this over the years, but I think it's important that we take the time to acknowledge and thank our staff for delivering really what the residents expect of us.
Councillor Fernandez?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that Councillor Griswold made a valid point in that many taxpayers are not familiar with reading the financial report. But I think in our communications, it's important for us to differentiate between our $1 billion in assets and what we actually have in cash to spend. And I think that's part of good communications and transparency as we move forward, because I'm sure there will be lots of questions from citizens when they reflect on the provincial election and they look forward to our election. I think finances are difficult for many people to understand unless it's their own personal finances. So I think our team does a wonderful job of getting out good messaging around budget time, but maybe it needs to happen more, especially around audit time as well. Thanks so much for this.
Okay, and I'll just add my thanks to everyone involved, both with our auditing firm, KPMG, and with our staff team. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing these financial statements and then auditing them. Starts obviously with all of the systems we have in place throughout the year that makes it easier that when you get to year-end time, you get your numbers and your statements, and then ultimately get all of that information over to the auditors for the audit process. I can also share with council as part of the normal review. I sit down with the auditors and ask if there's anything in camera without staff present, if there are any issues or concerns, and as expected, there were none identified, so that can be reflected in the minutes as well. And finally, just a heartfelt thank you to everyone, and please pass it on to the rest of the teams going forward. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Okay. Welcome, Ms. Tasker.
Great.
You've been busy.
Yes, very busy. Good afternoon, everyone. So for my second quarter audit status report today, I'm going to be taking you through two reviews that have been recently completed. The first is the value for money audit of consultants and professional services, and then the second one is the comprehensive audit of winter maintenance. Also in progress right now is a follow-up audit of our hiring transparency. So the first topic I'll take you through is a review of the use of consultants and professional services, and this was completed by myself and Melissa Ryan. If you recall, Council had asked for a review of engineering consultant contracts to determine why the City hires the number of consultants that it does, and also to determine if City staff were having to redo the work that the consultants were hired to do. So the objectives of this review were to do simply that, to assess the value provided by consultants and professional services firms, and to assess the reasons why we hire consultants rather than using internal staff for the work. Before I get into the findings, I just wanted to start with some definitions, since the purchasing bylaw in this area has changed recently. Previously, when the City hired an outside firm, they were all called consultants. But under the new purchasing bylaw, which came into effect in late 2017, these services are now divided into consulting and professional services. Consulting services are where the firm provides expertise or advice that the City can then consider when making decisions, and this also includes training. Professional services, on the other hand, is the provision of labor to do the work and may include the delivery of physical products. So the majority of the engineering contracts that you were interested in for things like road reconstructions, stormwater utility projects, etc., are professional services contracts. For this review, however, the historical data that was in our financial system is all coded as consultants under the old definition. So we're going to have a mix of both professional services and true consulting work in the sample that we chose for this review. So I just wanted to make that clear as we get into this. So the main activity for this review was to test a sample of contracts. We chose 32 contracts that spanned across 3 years and all types of contracts, with 60% of them being related to engineering, as that was the focus of this review. The sample represents 8% of the total number of contracts during that period and 19% of the total value. We also conducted interviews, first with supply services to get a better understanding and to document what the purchasing bylaw is, and to learn about their experience that they've had with these types of contracts. We then interviewed engineering management and the project managers for each of the 32 contracts in the sample. There were 3 areas that we asked about during the interviews with the project managers. First, we asked whether city staff had to perform or redo any of the work that we paid the vendor to do. We wanted to discover if the perception that there was a lot of rework was actually true or not. Next, we asked why the city had hired the consultant or professional services firm rather than using internal staff. And finally, we wanted to look at both the positive side and the negative aspects. So we looked at whether there was anything that the vendor had provided that was either above and beyond what we paid them to do, or that provided value add in comparison to what city staff could provide. Regarding the reasons for using a consultant or professional services firm, 88% of the contracts in the sample were because the city lacked the specialized skills in-house for the various components of the contract, or did not possess a specialized piece of equipment or software. For some of these contracts, the city also lacked the capacity for some of the components, such as project management, which city staff actually do have the skills to provide. The remaining 12% of contracts were outsourced solely because of the lack of capacity to get the work done in a timely manner. In a few cases, staff also mentioned that in addition to lack of skill or capacity, it was actually advantageous to have an objective third party perform the work or provide advice, especially when the project was contentious or under increased public scrutiny. Through our review, we concluded that there was no evidence based on the sample that city staff should be hired to provide the services in-house, because the quantity of work and the seasonal nature of some of the construction-related contracts does not justify having permanent staff. In addition, the breadth of specialized skills that consulting and professional services firms bring to the table could not be obtained in a single hire, and the amount of work for each of the individual disciplines does not justify hiring multiple staff to fulfill those roles. I want to touch briefly on the specific role of the project manager in engineering contracts, as this is perhaps where there was a perception of duplication of work. Through our research, we found that the engineering contracts can be project managed either by city staff or by the professional services firm, depending on the size and scope of the project and the capacity available in-house. In the case where the primary project manager role is being done by the vendor, the city still requires someone internally to be responsible for the project oversight and to liaise with the contracted firm. So it may seem that this work is being duplicated when in fact it's not. A separate topic, it should be noted that within the last year, all of the progress payment processing has been moved in-house rather than having the professional services firms perform this work. And this has led to a reduction in errors and more timely processing of the payments. This chart shows some of the differences between using city staff as the primary project manager versus using a professional services firm. City staff are typically used for simpler or smaller projects, and one benefit of using in-house staff is that there is perhaps more care taken with the as-built drawings, as they know their colleagues will be relying on them to do their work. So that's not to say that vendors are careless, by no means am I saying that, just that internal staff have a better appreciation of how the drawings will be used in the field. The biggest issue with using in-house resources is capacity. The city does not have enough staff, enough physical space to house more staff, or management to supervise more staff, to accomplish all of the planned or required projects. By using professional services firms to manage the project, the city project manager can oversee up to 4 projects at a time, which increases the number of projects that can be completed at once. Another benefit of outsourcing project management duties is that often projects require the coordination and management of multiple disciplines and sub-trades, which I'll talk about more on the next slide. As mentioned, though, even if the city contracts out the project management duties, the contract still requires oversight by an internal project manager. As I mentioned, many projects require a number of different and unrelated specialized skills, such as geotechnical, electrical engineering, botany, etc. Professional services teams either employ or have access to all of these specialists under one roof, which is a key benefit to hiring a professional services firm. There is not enough work for these specialist positions to hire internally. Additionally, some of these specialties also require expensive equipment, which would be impractical for the city to purchase for the limited times that they are used. The next area that we looked at was rework. In addition to the perception of duplication between the city and the vendor project managers, there was also a perception that we were having to redo the work that we hired the vendor to perform. We found that 5 of the 32 contracts in the sample required some form of rework by staff. Typically, this was in the form of adjusting some estimates or fixing calculation errors or reformatting the reports to be in the proper format to present to council. This was more typically found from vendors who had never worked with the city before, whereas firms that we've used before knew what was expected of them. The amount of rework was considered to be minimal by the city project managers and not something that they were particularly upset about. We also found that 73% of the sample provided some sort of value add that impressed city staff. They mentioned things like firms that had worked in the region on similar projects that are familiar with the background and could provide connections to related projects being done by the region of Waterloo. Or they possessed proprietary software for sophisticated modeling that was helpful to the project. As mentioned, a number of them had extensive capacity and multiple disciplines all available within their firm. And some had useful global experience or experience in obtaining permits from various agencies. Overall, they felt that they were receiving good value for the money spent on professional services or consultants. So based on our research, we can conclude that using consultants and professional services is a valued and important part of our service delivery model, which allows us to supplement internal skills and capacity in order to complete more projects in a timely manner. We found while there were some duplications of effort due to some minor rework, that this was minimal and was not a cause for concern. So staff are conscious of costs and aim to use the most efficient combination of outsourced versus in-house resources. Are there any questions?
There are some. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, Karina. This was one of the things that I had asked about in the past. So I'm glad to see that this is done. When you said we looked at 32 contracts out of how many? 62, 75?
Sorry, I'm not good at math in my head, but that was 8% of the total number of contracts and 19% of the total value of contracts over a 3-year period.
Okay, and that's not my forte either, so if anybody can figure that out, that'd be great. Because it sounds like a small sample over the 3 years in terms of, you know, how many actual contracts we do, and some are big and some are small. And certainly we've heard time and time again that it's because we don't have the ability, we don't have the resources, we don't have the time. So that kind of begs the question, are we moving ahead on some projects sooner, faster than maybe we should be for what our staff is able to do?
I can't speak for all of the projects, but I know when speaking with engineering management as part of this process, they indicated that this is by using professional services firms to project manage their projects, it allowed them to complete more with the resources that they had. So each internal project manager could handle up to 4 projects at a time. So it did allow us to complete more. In terms of the ability to actually complete them in the field, I can't speak to that as I didn't look that far into the actual projects themselves.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that I've seen some of those challenges is that project manager from the city is juggling a number of balls, and if one of those balls drops, then we run into some challenges as the project moves forward. And so I'm wondering if we're expecting more from our staff than we should be, if we maybe should be saying, what can you handle is for too many, and of course it depends on the complexity of each project. The other question I had was around rework. So I think sometimes I've seen, heard, experienced that we have to chase after some of these professional contractors, that there's work that's not, small pieces of work, so small pieces of sidewalk that have not been completed, or small pieces of curbing that's not been completed, or landscaping that's not been completed. And it seems to kind of drag on. Is that built into this rework, as you called it, or is that another side concern when or challenge, let's say, when we're working with outside contractors?
So I believe that would fall under the construction piece of it, and that was outside of the scope of this review. So we're looking at solely the professional services firms for the project management aspect of it, and any true consulting advice and direction that other firms have given.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very correct when you say that we have some of those specialties in-house, but a consulting firm will have a broader and more diverse team. But I wonder when you say about us not having enough space, because if you go to the COF, there's a lot of empty offices still. I'm saying that we should be hiring staff, but I'm wondering if there's opportunity for shifting staff from where there isn't enough space to another facility, if that's a concern when we're working on big diverse projects like that. So that's more of a comment than a question. I think that was all the questions I had. If I think of another one, I'll cue in again. Thanks.
Councillor Schneider?
Thank you, Mayor Bavanovic. Thanks so much, Corinne, for this valuable information. When it comes to bringing in an outside consultant, I don't know if there's any way to qualify it, but is there a way to measure the possible savings both in time and in finances that we might experience from bringing in an outside expert rather than trying to do it ourselves?
I think that the savings would mostly come in play with the timing of the project, as well as if there were specialties that were provided from the consulting firm or professional services firm that we would have to hire ourselves. I think you could calculate the cost savings for that, because if you brought that in-house, you would need to hire a permanent full-time staff. You've got a full-time salary that you need to pay for the entire year, as opposed to just for one project. So.
Yeah, I noticed when we were on our infrastructure tour, it's one thing to read a report in a package, and then to go out and see the actual work, you can appreciate the magnitude of what all has to be done. So I think it's important to get the right people and get the project done properly. Sorry.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Bavanovic. Thanks, Green, for your report. I kind of want to follow along with Councillor Schneider's question with regards to how you quantify. How can you? Is there a way to quantify staff time if they were to do all this in-house, all those consultant reports?
Specific to the project management piece of it for the engineering contracts, like the number that has been given is that they would only, if they were doing one, they'd only be able to do one project. If they outsource the project management to the other firms, they can do 4. So that's kind of a loose calculation in terms of how much more can be accomplished. In terms of the other specialties, again, we don't have those skills in-house, so it would be hard to calculate.
Okay, so in other words, if we didn't do this, we would have to hire a lot more staff.
In order to keep everything on schedule and the projects that we've planned to do, yes.
And hire different different staff with different specifications, which may not be useful for us on a long-term basis.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Those are all the questions.
All right. On to the second review, and this one's a long one, so settle in. The next topic is winter maintenance, and this review was conducted by myself, Melissa Ryan, and Alicia Bennett. Since this was a comprehensive review of the entire winter maintenance program, there's a number of topics that I'm going to be covering today. I'm going to start off with the objectives and methodology and just an overview of the overall findings. Then I'll talk about three things that impact the delivery of winter maintenance services, and those include the provincial winter maintenance standards, growth of infrastructure, and climate change. Then I'll talk about specific aspects of the program, including data management, staffing, customer service, as well as a number of specific services. So before I get into the review objectives, I think it's worth just taking a moment to talk about what the goals of a winter maintenance program are. The primary goal is obviously to be able to provide a safe and accessible transportation network across the city, which includes not only vehicles, but also pedestrians, cyclists, transit, and emergency vehicles. Now, in addition to that, the city needs to be able to meet the provincial maintenance standards. But it's also important that we take the needs of staff into consideration, because weather doesn't take a vacation, and it can impact the work-life balance of staff with its unpredictable nature. So it's important to try to take into work-life balance for staff into consideration. And finally, it's also important to try to minimize the environmental impacts of the service, primarily related to salt usage and idling of vehicles. So throughout the review, we kept those overarching goals in the back of our minds to guide our recommendations. So the objective of this review is similar to other comprehensive reviews that we've done in the past, and our goal was to look at every aspect of the winter maintenance program and to make recommendations for improvement and mitigation of risks. In this case, we also had a very special focus on what the new maintenance standards would mean for this program. We started this review with internal and external stakeholder consultation, which included 37 staff interviews or surveys, and all of the winter maintenance staff had the opportunity to fill out a survey if they wanted to. We had 13 management surveys. We did 2 SWOT analysis workshops with supervisors, as well as several other workshops on specific topics. We had 23 internal and external stakeholder interviews and interviews with 4 members of council. We reviewed a large quantity of internal and external documents, policies, bylaws, data, and other audits related to this topic. We did benchmarking with 9 other cities who had similar lane kilometers or climates, as well as a few who were larger and could provide insights into what growth might look like for us. We looked at a number of factors that influence the service, including changes to the maintenance standards, the impacts of growth, and what the kilometers of planned infrastructure might mean to resourcing, the impacts of climate change, how new design features such as wider multi-use pathways or traffic calming features impact the service, and the connection to the recent Love My Hood movement of resident-led projects. Next, we looked at the supporting structures for the overall winter maintenance program, including challenges with a number of the staffing processes, such as the job pool, call-ins, and payroll. We looked briefly at some training concerns and non-winter tasks that are performed when it's not snowing, as well as the suitability of our existing equipment. We also did a detailed analysis of the financial information for the last 5 years. And the final piece of the review looked at specific services and how they are provided. For some of these, we made concrete recommendations based on our analysis, and for others, we presented options and benchmarking information with recommendations to refer the decision to council. Because this is an internal audit, we did not do any public consultation. However, as staff move forward with any of the changes to service delivery levels, there will be opportunities for staff to engage the public, either for information or for their opinions where appropriate. Before I get into the specifics, just some overall thoughts. We found that in most cases, staff are able to meet or exceed the old maintenance standards. However, we know that staff are going to need to adapt and modify their approach in order to incorporate and still meet the new standards, which I'll talk about on the next slide. We found stakeholders of the service, so those would be other city locations such as our community centers or the region, that they were generally happy with the service that staff provided and commented that the internal communications around snow events was excellent. Now, while there were lots of ideas for improvements that were provided by both stakeholders and staff, the main themes that emerged from that were focused on providing improved accessibility for sidewalks, addressing windrows, and providing more information to the public. We also noted that a number of the internal processes that support this service could be streamlined to free up management time. We ended up making 75 recommendations, which were shared with staff, and we won't be going through all 75 today, but we've selected a few that we felt would be of most interest to Council and the public. So as you may be aware, the provision of winter maintenance services is directed by Ontario Maintenance Standards, OREG 23902. The previous version of this regulation stipulated the allowable depths of snow accumulation and timeframes by which the municipality must address snow and ice for roadways. The timeframes of snow and ice depths were laid out in a table based on the classification of the roads according to the speed limit and the amount of vehicular traffic. While some road classifications had shorter timeframes, overall, all roads must be cleared within 24 hours of the cessation of snowfall. City staff, as I mentioned, were able in most cases to clear all roads within 14 to 24 hours. In May this year, a revised standard was passed into law. The main changes to the regulation include new requirements to now address ice prevention and snow and ice accumulation on sidewalks and bike lanes, as well as monitoring sidewalk conditions. This is a relatively large increase in municipal responsibility and will require staff to make changes to their winter maintenance program in order to continue to be in compliance with the standard. Another factor that impacts the delivery of winter maintenance service is the growth in the kilometers of roads, sidewalks, and trails that the city is responsible for maintaining. We were able to gather information from our GIS system that shows the planned infrastructure over the next 10 years or so, with the majority of the known additions being planned to be built in the next 1 to 2 years. We use this information to predict the increase in resources required in order to continue to meet the maintenance standards using the current level of service. The amount of road kilometers is expected to increase by 4% over the next 1 to 2 years. What this means is that one more plow and one more salt route will be required to simply keep up with growth and keep the same standards that we have right now. Now I'll talk about sidewalks and trails together because they use the same equipment and they are intermingled as part of the same routes. Sidewalks are expected to grow by 7%, which is assuming that all new roads have sidewalks on both sides of the road. And this doesn't take into account any infill or reconstruction where sidewalks are added to existing roads that previously didn't have them. However, that number is not that significant. And just as a point of reference, the city currently winter maintains 18% of all sidewalks, with 82% being maintained by property owners. And I'll speak more about that later when I talk about sidewalks in detail. Trails are expected to have the largest increase of 81% over the next 1 to 2 years. Currently, the city only winter maintains 19% of all trails, mainly the paved multi-use pathways that are adjacent to roadways in place of sidewalks. This combined growth of sidewalks and trails will require an additional 4 sidewalk plow routes if we assume the city maintains the same percentage going forward, which of course may not be the case as we explore what's required to meet the new maintenance standards. However, based on what staff do today, the growth alone would mean 4 more routes. Now, back in 2016, staff had estimated that if the city were to take on maintaining all sidewalks, then an additional 27 routes would be required, which is a significant increase of resources required. The second factor in the demand for winter maintenance service is obviously the weather. On average, we currently see between 4 to 6 snow events with accumulations of greater than 8 centimeters per season. However, climate change is going to change what the weather looks like and may require some different approaches as we see changing weather patterns. So localized climate projections for the Waterloo region that were published by the Interdisciplinary Center on Climate Change and the University of Waterloo indicate a number of changes that we can expect, including an increase in monthly temperatures and decrease in the number of extreme cold days. So this will mean that there's going to be an increase in the freeze-thaw cycles, which presents staff with challenges around ice prevention and treatment. We will also see an increase in precipitation in the early years as snow, and then as time goes on, more will be in the form of rain, and a 40% increase in the amount of freezing rain events. So this may mean that the city needs to consider a different mix of services and possibly different equipment. So our recommendations in this section are fairly straightforward, and they speak simply to monitoring growth and climate changes and factoring those impacts into strategic planning decisions around resourcing and equipment purchases. The next topic is around data management and analysis. We found during our review that a lot of data is being collected regarding winter maintenance, including the labor and equipment hours and dollars for a number of different specific activities, such as roads, sidewalks, regional roads, downtown, etc. There are also GPS units in each of the vehicles, which also collect location and route data. However, when we tried to utilize the data for our review analysis, we found it very difficult to retrieve what we needed, and also found that some inconsistencies between data sets. For example, the GPS data did not align with the associated work orders. We found that although the data is tracked, there isn't consideration for how data will be used. Also, neither of the operations divisions have a dedicated staff person to monitor and analyze the data, whether that be the financial and budget information, equipment utilization, work orders, or resourcing information. And supervisors are too busy with other tasks to delve into the data or to ensure data accuracy. Now, financial planning does provide a very high-level variance analysis, as it does with all divisions. However, given the amount of detailed transactions that flow through the winter maintenance accounts, the oversight is not detailed enough to ensure that the data is correct. So there is a risk that the regional expenses are not being fully recovered if they're not coded correctly to the proper accounts. There's also a risk that operational and budgeting decisions are being made based on incorrect data. So first, we're recommending that staff be very purposeful about the type of data that they're collecting, with an aim of using the data for specific decisions. So anytime that they implement a process change, for example, they should be capturing data about the cost, the time, resourcing, and equipment prior to the change, and then again after implementation, in order to evaluate the effect of the change. Without spending the time up front to determine what data needs to be collected to make the evaluation, staff will find that the generic data that's being collected is not sufficient to do any meaningful analysis, which is what we found. The second recommendation is that they reallocate headcount and budget to create an analyst position, which would support both operations divisions for both summer and winter functions. This role would monitor the accounts daily to ensure accuracy of data and provide analysis on equipment utilization, budget variances, and resource optimization. They would also be responsible for reconciling the invoice to the region for services that our staff provide and ensuring that all expenses are being fully recovered. The topic of staffing is quite large and something that was mentioned by staff, management, and stakeholders as an area that needed improvement. It is generally felt that the process of ensuring that there are staff to perform the winter maintenance work is very cumbersome and complex. It involves a number of distinct processes, including the winter job pool, which I'll talk about in a moment, a process to call in staff outside of their regular shifts, a process to ensure that overtime is offered equally to staff, and a process for tracking time against work orders. These processes are very manual and require a lot of supervisor time, and this administrative work takes them away from their core duties of actually supervising their staff. Now, while we did have recommendations related to all of the staffing processes, I'm going to highlight the job pool issues and recommendations for you today, as that is one area that has the greatest impact to staff. The job pool is a process where staff from both of the operations divisions sign up for their preferred winter positions in order of seniority in one pool. What this means is that there's no restrictions on which position an employee may choose, other than that they're encouraged to choose a position for which they already have the training and skills. So staff may end up reporting to a different supervisor or a different manager and be in a different division in the winter compared to their summer position. While the summer position remains static from year to year, they have the opportunity to change their winter jobs every year if they wish. Now, while some staff liked the current one-pool system because it gave them the choice of position and rewarded seniority, there were several challenges with the system. First, performance management of staff becomes difficult when they're switching supervisors and possibly managers mid-year. With being responsible for so many staff, sometimes performance issues don't get properly transferred to the new supervisor and therefore end up slipping through the cracks. Because jobs are chosen based on seniority, sometimes the least experienced staff are left with the hardest jobs. And finally, when staff switch divisions, for example, park staff choose a roads winter position or vice versa, it's difficult to assign non-winter work when it's not snowing, as the skill sets don't always align with the work that's required. We found through our benchmarking that most cities that we looked at do not allow staff a choice in their role, and the work is assigned by management based on skill and experience. In order to analyze what the best resourcing model is, we held a workshop with this management team where we evaluated the pros and cons of various resourcing models. We looked at the current job pool model, a two-pool model where there were separate winter pools for parks and roads staff, and dual classifications where you would have a set winter and summer duties. Each of the resourcing models was analyzed based on a number of criteria. Management decided that the moving to the two-pool system would offer a number of operational benefits over the current one-pool system, while still giving staff a choice of jobs and rewarding seniority, which were the primary benefits of the current system. They felt this model would provide better continuity between seasons, which aids in team building, performance management, and administrative functions. It also more closely aligns the skills of staff with the work required and provides more efficiency for non-winter work. There's still a lot of work to do to determine which positions will be part of the parks and roads pools in order to ensure adequate resourcing and supervision for all functions. So this won't roll out in the next winter season, but will come into effect for the 2019-2020 winter season. And management will work with staff and the union over that time period to figure out all of the details. The next topic is customer service. Through our interviews with Council, it was desired that the City be able to communicate more information to the public regarding the status of the plow during a snow event. We know that a lot of calls that come into the Corporate Contact Centre regarding winter maintenance are simply requests for information about when particular streets will be plowed. It was noted that some other cities have a Where's My Plow app where residents can see where the plows are in real time. However, management has expressed concerns that there is a risk of misleading the public with such an app and providing false expectations if the app did not factor in and clearly display the priority of roads. In response to Council's request for this, we are recommending further investigation into the capabilities of our current GPS system to enable plow tracking in order to provide real-time data to residents. Therefore, the recommendation is to gather information about the benefits as well as the risks and the costs and refer back to Council with a staff recommendation whether to proceed or not. Now I'm going to talk about some of the specific services, and the first being the wing person. Plow and salter trucks typically have a front blade, as shown in the picture there, as well as a wing that can be raised or lowered. And that allows 1.2 meters, or roughly 40% more, to be plowed than using just the blade alone. So a wing person is an employee who sits in the passenger seat and assists the driver in operating the wing of the plow. We found the majority of benchmark cities do not operate with a wing person. Over the past 2 winter seasons, management has experimented with removing the wing person from trucks on a volunteer basis while still getting the driver to operate the wing by themselves. By having a single operator rather than having a wing person, this allows those wing person's staff to be redeployed to other tasks while still plowing the wider swath of road. This becomes important as more staff will likely be required to address the new maintenance standards. We tried to analyze this pilot to determine if it truly is more cost effective. However, as mentioned, the data required to make this assessment was not available. Anecdotally, though, we know that this creates capacity as the wing person can be redeployed, and that the single operator is now able to plow 40% wider than if they were operating without the wing. Some staff mentioned that they felt that driving with the wing down without a wing person was a safety concern and that collisions would increase. However, data from the last 2 years does not indicate any increase in collisions related to wing operation, with an average of 3 collisions per season. So we're recommending that staff continue to evaluate the one-person operation and to work with the union to review implementing this further across the fleet. Regarding cul-de-sacs, the current service delivery model is to use contractors during snow events of more than 8 centimeters, and then using city staff as part of their normal plow routes for all other times. The contractors use blowers, which typically provide a better level of service to property owners than the plows, as they do not leave windrows behind. The original decision to contract out this work was made in order to meet the maintenance standards in light of growing infrastructure. By using contractors for the 500-plus cul-de-sacs across the city, coupled with GPS units in the vehicles and snow event parking van, staff were able to decrease the overall time to clear all routes during a snow event from 2 to 3 days down to 14 to 24 hours. During this review, staff had wondered whether it might be cheaper to have staff provide this service rather than contracting out for snow events. So we did a detailed analysis and evaluation of several different service delivery alternatives, including either hiring more staff or using existing staff with a number of different combinations of equipment, which we discussed during a workshop with management. The outcome was that the analysis shows without a doubt that the contracting out of cul-de-sacs is currently the most cost-effective alternative, which allows the city to meet the maintenance standards for roads. So we recommend to continue using contractors to plow cul-de-sacs for snow events, as this option has the lowest fixed and variable operating costs and capital requirements. It doesn't require extra staff or equipment. It provides a better level of service during heavy snowfalls, and it allows compliance with the maintenance standards for roads. The next topic is sidewalks, which, as you know, is a hot topic with council and several advocacy groups. The city currently has 1,202 kilometers of sidewalks, and winter maintenance is a joint responsibility between the city and property owners. The city winter maintains 216 kilometers, or roughly 18% of the total, which are primarily sidewalks adjacent to city-owned properties, all downtown sidewalks, and sidewalks that run behind an owner's property. There is a bylaw in place which requires property owners to clear snow and ice from their adjacent sidewalks within 24 hours of the cessation of snowfall. The maintenance standards were previously silent on the topic of sidewalks. However, the new version now has requirements for snow and ice removal, ice prevention, and sidewalk monitoring. This is a significant change and will require a different approach to ensure standards are met. What that approach is remains to be seen. The city's infrastructure and design features present a number of challenges for winter maintenance. The biggest challenge for sidewalks is curb-face sidewalks, which require snow loading as there is no boulevard space to pile the snow from the road or bike lanes. In the past, there have sometimes been challenges with the timing of when the sidewalk and road plows come through, meaning that the sidewalk plow may have already completed their route, only to have to return when the road plow covers the curb-face sidewalk with snow. Concerns have been raised in the past by several advocacy groups who were concerned about the current service delivery models not providing a consistency or accessibility, as not everyone clears their sidewalk at the same time or to the same standards, making it difficult to travel on sidewalks effectively. Because the city anticipated the changes to the maintenance standards and because of these concerns, a separate but related project was started in February this year to take a deeper look at what that approach might look like. As council is aware, the project is being led by Aaron McCrimmon-Jones, and he will be bringing a report to committee next week, which outlines 3 enhanced service delivery models and 1 monitoring practice for council consideration. The recommendations in this review simply link to that report, as we are recommending that a cost-benefit analysis of the options be conducted in order to inform decision-making for council. Coupled with this is, again, purpose-driven data collection, which involves clearly defining how to measure success of each of the options and then developing strategies to collect the appropriate data. In the meantime, it's recommended that staff revise the wording of the current bylaw to also include a requirement for property owners to address ice formation and to provide regular winter maintenance, including during prolonged snow events and for snow accumulations less than 8 centimeters. Staff need to also attempt to better coordinate the sidewalk and plow routes to avoid having to redo curb-face sidewalk sections. It's also recognized that the current shift structure for sidewalk maintenance does not provide weekend or after-hours coverage, so we're recommending that shifts be altered to provide better coverage. The next topic is bike lanes, which is another change in the maintenance standards. In terms of city priorities, the Cycling Master Plan has previously recommended that the city identify a core network of winter-maintained trails, sidewalks, and bike lanes. The previous maintenance standards were again silent on the topic of bike lanes. However, the new standards now require snow and ice on bike lanes to be addressed within certain timeframes according to the class of the adjacent roadway. The time allotment is typically double the amount allowed to clear the roadway, but overall, all bike lanes must be cleaned within 24 hours of cessation of snowfall. Currently, the city stores snow in bike lanes in many places, particularly where there are curb-face sidewalks or no boulevard space. Another challenge related to bike lanes is the addition of paved multi-use trails. These trails are much wider than traditional sidewalks, and the sidewalk plows are not wide enough to plow them in one pass. Staff are currently uncertain of how to address the new bike lane standards. Now, research was done as part of this review that show a wide range of approaches to bike lane maintenance, ranging from having a priority route only in the downtown core, like Toronto, all the way to prioritizing the entire bike network over the road network when it comes to winter maintenance in such places as Copenhagen. The one common feature, though, is that most cities commit to winter maintaining a core bike route. Staff like this approach and are in the process of researching whether a bylaw could be enacted that officially closes all bike lanes except for the core route during the winter months, and whether this would meet the requirement of the new standards. So in the meantime, it's recommended that staff start with defining the core transportation route and then examine if the existing plow routes to ensure that the core bike route can be cleared within the required timeframes. Then, if the bylaw is allowed and enacted, staff will need to investigate the best way to communicate that the routes are closed during the winter. And the final hot topic is windrows, which is something that Council has asked us to look into because you obviously receive a lot of complaints about how hard it is for some residents to remove the windrow from the bottom of their driveway after the plow has gone through. We did some benchmarking to see what other cities do, as this is not a service that the city currently provides. The majority of cities that provide windrow service only do it for those that are unable to do it themselves, so namely elderly or disabled residents. Some offer this service to only a limited number of residents per year, while others have no cap on their program. Those without a cap have ranged from about 375 to 1,700 applicants per year. Some charge a small fee, ranging from $50 to $100 per season, to recoup some of their costs, while most offer this service for free. Most also provide this service using contractors, sometimes as part of the cul-de-sac contract. And the average cost is about $20 per driveway. Well, Council has also asked us in the past to look into gated plows that would clear windrows as part of the plow route. Due to the cost and other factors such as route efficiency and spacing of driveways, we echo staff's recommendation that this is not feasible within our city. We suggest that our recommended approach would be similar to other municipalities and to offer a program to elderly or disabled residents. The level of tax-based subsidy would be up to Council, but this could also be coordinated with the sidewalk maintenance assistance that's being recommended as part of the sidewalk report, where community agencies such as the Working Centre would administer the application process and provide staff through a city grant. Otherwise, this could be provided through the cul-de-sac contract. So our recommendation in the report is for staff to seek Council direction through budget on whether you want to offer a program and what form it will take. So in conclusion, we found that previously staff did a great job in meeting or exceeding the old maintenance standards, but we know that the new standards, which include monitoring and addressing snow and ice on sidewalks, trails, and bike lanes, will present challenges for staff and will require a different approach. Even without these changes to the standards, growth and climate change will require staff to adapt and for more resources to be deployed. The recommendations in this report are the first step in a long process for improvement. Any requests for additional staff, equipment, or additional services will come through budget, and this report just provides the background analysis for any requests. So with that, I will open up the floor to any questions.
Thank you, and we do have some. We'll start with Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yes, thank you, Karina, for this report. I thought it was very thorough and well done. I'm going to start at the end first. What is your plan for next steps and follow-up on this specific comprehensive audit?
So the two operations divisions will have 3 months to put together an action plan in terms of prioritizing the recommendations, which I will then follow up with them on. That's really the limit of my involvement. The ownership is passed over to the division to handle.
Is it something that in, a certain duration that you could go back in and look at the recommendations to see where it's done?
So as similar to any other review, not sooner than 1 year. It would be subject to a status update where I would go back and ask them for a status of all the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. My other questions were with respect to the wing person. And I might have missed it in the report, but is there somewhere specific that the wing people would be going right now, other than if we had to increase our sidewalk routes?
So there's a number of, they haven't completely figured it out yet, but there are a number of new things that we required. So under the new maintenance standards, there is a requirement for monitoring of sidewalks. So there will be resources required for that. It's not something we currently do. Depending on which option or what program gets approved by council for the sidewalk program, there will likely be more resources required there as well.
How many plows currently have wing people?
Sorry, say that again?
How many of the plows, when we're in a full plow, has a wing person?
Currently, all of them do. I don't know, Roz, do you know the exact number? During a full plow, so during this pilot, the operators were allowed to have a wing person sit with them.
Through you, Mayor Vervanvik, to Councillor Galloway-Seelock. Right now, we are piloting the salt plows, so the salters right now. The operators have been given the choice of whether or not they want to have a wing person, so this is our first step in piloting it. So currently, all the plows in a full plow have a wing person with them.
Minus the graders.
Sorry?
Minus the graders.
Minus the graders, that's correct, yes. There's no seat.
Yeah, there's no room for two.
And I'm not sure what the actual numbers are.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay.
Yep, thank you. One of my concerns is, with respect to this, is the boulevard parking. Currently, with having wing people, they are the eyes on that side. I'm just concerned, like, boulevard parking currently happens in Ward 5, but it's going to come back for the rest of the city. So I worry about the conflicts that could happen there if we take away the wing person. Was that thought of at all?
So certainly this is a recommendation that we have to look into further, and that will be a consideration that we look into.
Okay, good, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. So I have a number of questions, and I'll probably run out of time, so I'll come back to them. Page 251, you talked about the difficulty to retrieve data and inconsistency of data sets. I have to say I'm disappointed to hear this, because my understanding is we have analysts who are supposed to be doing this work. So why are we having this inconsistency, and why are we having difficulty retrieving it? Has the training been incomplete? Where's the challenges here?
So we do collect a lot of information. So there is information about all of the labor hours and dollars and equipment hours and dollars for each work order that gets processed. Some of the challenges that we found through our review on the financial side is that staff may not always choose the correct account code. So the data may not be, it flows through to the wrong account. Also, some of the data is not specific enough. So when we were trying to do the wing person analysis, we wanted to know specifically how long does it take to do this route with and without a wing person. There was no data within the system that showed whether the wing person was working or not on that particular route. So it was more just about being very purposeful about what data we're collecting to prove certain points or to do certain analysis, because the generic information that's being collected is is not detailed enough to be able to make that specific analysis.
Okay, thanks. On page 252, so that was just a duplicate follow-up to the question that you just answered. And 254, you talked about the different options and that staff have been able to choose their winter jobs. And just anecdotally, I had an opportunity to speak to a retired snowplow operator, and one of the things that he said to me was having the same route, winter and summer, allowed him the ability to know exactly what was happening on that route. So if there had been construction, he knew, and if there was issues or changes, he knew all of that. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned that allowing that openness has created some of this inefficiency. Is that what you found in your review?
Yeah, so while some operators do choose the same route every single year, because of the job pool and it being, you get to pick in order of seniority, people have the option to pick different jobs, so it's not always the same route. And as I said, some of the challenges with this model is that you've got staff that are crossing divisions that may not have the skills and experience required for the particular jobs. Now, the ultimate, I guess, version of a resourcing model would be that you have a set summer job that's linked to a winter job. However, moving to that type of model would be very difficult from a labor relations perspective. And it's not something that we felt would be beneficial at this time. So kind of the happy medium is having a parks pool and a roads pool, so that you've got park staff doing parks work, we've got road staff doing roads work, but they still get a choice of their position within that pool. Okay,
because I think it is very critical to efficiencies that the person who is driving those plows understand their area really well, whether it's summer or winter, so that if there are changes, that they're able to address them as they're plowing. On 256, we were talking about the GIS and the Where is My Plow app. If the residents at least had an understanding that the plow is in the area, would that not at least reduce the number of calls that we get saying, I haven't seen a plow and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon? If they understood that, okay, within the next hour or within the next 2 hours, you should see a plow. Would that not help with some of the challenges that the contact center has with calls?
Perhaps it could. And we currently do have a map that shows the priority of the roads, and there is communications that go out to say we're currently working on priority 1 or we've moved on to priority 2, so that people can understand that if they're priority 3, they're not going to be done for a little while yet. The challenge becomes if you have an actual tracking of where the plow actually is, knowing what that priority road is that they're on is a challenge.
Okay. My last, it's not really my last question, I guess. We were talking about the wing person, and one of the issues you talked about was the narrowness between driveways and the ability for that wing to be down and windrows. So is this something that you see through this comprehensive review, that without that wing anymore, that this is something that we really need to be figuring out with windrows? Because it's not just, I don't think it's just residents who have physical challenges or limitations or seniors. During that April horrendous weekend that we had, it was just the volume of snow and ice that was being left at the end of driveways. Should that be also a component to how we address windrows? Just the volume, just the sheer mass and the volume, not just the fact that some people are not able to do it.
Perhaps. I think you're confusing the two things, though. Having the wing down is not the same as having a gated plow that does the windrows. The gated plows, what we found with those, they need to be attached to a grader. We currently do not have, we would need to buy a whole new fleet of graders in order to have those deployed across the city for all of our routes. They also require a higher graded staff, so it increases your staff costs to be able to provide that service. So no doubt, I hear what you're saying, and that sometimes when it's a very heavy snowfall, everyone has trouble doing that. And that's something that will be up to council to decide when this comes back through budget. What level of service do you want to provide through a windrow program?
Okay. I have some other questions. I'll cue back in.
Okay. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. So what I'm hearing about windrows is don't talk about it now, just wait till around budget time and bring it up then. Is that correct?
Sorry, say it again.
Sorry, when it comes to windrows, we're not really discussing that now. We're waiting until budget time to see what the office. Okay,
So
great.
staff will bring back an issue paper, and council will have the opportunity to discuss whether to provide the service, and if so, what level of service you want to provide.
Very good. Just wanted to confirm that. One question of concern. On one of the slides, it mentioned addressing the wording and new standards for ice formation and the maintenance of new ice formation. One of my concerns is the level of salt that the city uses, the region uses, we all use. I understand it's a very significant concern for our groundwater. Do we have any idea yet what the implications for salt use would be as a result of these changes?
Yes, we've done some calculations. Currently, the city uses about 1,134 metric tons per season to treat the 216 kilometers of sidewalk that we currently maintain, based on the times when we would need it to get rid of the ice. If we maintained all 1,202 kilometers of sidewalks, that would mean an increase of about 5,100 metric tons, based on similar climate.
An increase? So like,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't think I'm following this correctly, but are you saying like 4 times the amount?
Yes.
Okay. Have we discussed, are we bringing the region, because the region, you know, they're concerned with source water control, are we bringing the region into these discussions at all when this comes back?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations that wasn't highlighted in this report, but in the staff report that we provided, there used to be a committee of the region and all of the surrounding municipalities regarding winter maintenance policies. We've recommended that we reenact that committee so that we can have a consistent approach to addressing these winter maintenance standards, including salt usage.
Okay, I'm not going to ask it now. I'm not going to get into the obvious sidewalk issue we're going to deal with in the future, but I would be mentioning to staff now that I would be looking for regional input, because this is significant and could have some severe impacts in terms of the quality of our groundwater. The only other item I wanted to touch upon was...
Scott, just hang on one sec. No, Ms. Goldrick, you wanted to add something?
Sure. Through you, Mayor, just to confirm, we have reached out to the region in terms of the winter sidewalk maintenance program and the report going forward next Monday. So the region has had an opportunity we have had discussions with the region, and they've reviewed the report. And we continue to work with them in terms of their feedback in terms of the salt usage related to the proposed winter sidewalk maintenance.
Do you know if they will be providing feedback then in time for the next report?
My understanding is that they may choose to present to council next Monday.
Excellent, thank you. It's not actually a question, just a comment if I could. Mr. Mayor, just on the GPS issue, I do think that it's a very valuable type service for residents, and to be frank, councillors to be able to look up and see where the lanes have been done. I would only add that I think this is an excellent opportunity for our innovation lab to take a look at that, because my understanding is the snowplows already have GPS units on them, but they are not connected to the internet, so there's no way to upload that information. So there's a whole host of different ways that we could either connect that to a smartphone locally, or we could leverage our LED smart narrowband network as well to look at that. But I do think this is a solution that we can come up with relatively inexpensive, as opposed to having some big external contractor come in and look at it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give the chair for a little bit to Councillor Davey, but before I do, if people can indulge me to just ask a couple questions myself, and it particularly is around this customer service piece and the GPS. I guess I'm struggling a little bit with where the concerns lie around sharing the information. Like I think there's ways of explaining, the way we're going to end up going routing-wise. And I guess I'm concerned that we don't end up going down this, full-scale study about should we make GPS data available and make it user-friendly when, quite frankly, a number of cities are already doing it, and it shouldn't be that complex. I don't know who wants to tackle it.
Certainly, there are some cities that are using the Where's My Plow app or a variation of it. The MTO was the first people to actually roll this out, and if you can understand, the MTO have one class road. They have class 1 roads, right? So the priority and the actual response time is the same no matter where their plows are. In a municipality where you have multiple different classifications and different priorities, that's where the confusion lies. And some of the municipalities that have rolled this out have seen concerns from residents being called in saying, I'm tracking my plow and it's right around the corner, but it went right by me. So there certainly are ways to explain and say, well, it was going back to the yard to get salt, so that's why it didn't come down your road, or we're focusing on priority 1 roads, and if the snow keeps falling, we're going to continue to work on those priority 1 roads. So it's a matter of how we send that communication out, and what we currently have on our website is similar to what a neighboring municipality, one of our neighboring municipalities has now, where it actually shows the prioritization of where we're at, and then the communication is real time, updated on where we're at, so that people can actually take a look at, okay, it was posted an hour ago, they're still on priority 1s. So I know my map shows that I'm on priority 3, so I can expect to have to wait a little bit. So certainly there's ways of communication, but that's where the confusion is, in that people may get the wrong idea if they see a dot moving on a road neighborhood over.
Sure. So I guess maybe the second part of my question then would be has anybody who's introduced it gone away from it, or have they just had to improve their communication around it? In other words, has anybody stopped sharing that information after they've gone down the path of making it available?
Have
any municipalities reversed their decision and pulled that information?
I'm not aware of any that have pulled back. Now, I do know that there was some benchmarking that you did. So Cambridge has a Where Has My Plow Been, which is actually a quite useful tool that I think people could say, okay, well, that way if somebody says the plow was supposed to be in my area but you missed, then that's a call that can come into the CCC and say, you said that you were here but you weren't, right? So that's information that they're choosing to use. But I'm not aware of any municipalities that have reversed and gone backwards. They just know that they're dealing with the calls into their customer service reps.
Okay. So I guess my only comment would be, and then I'll turn it over to you, Scott, if we can maybe focus our efforts on this, not on should we do this, but on how to best do it and how to best communicate it. That would be my 2 cents worth as we continue to deliberate this issue.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. All right, so a couple questions. First, when we talk about the number of kilometers of sidewalk, 1,200 kilometers of sidewalk in the city of Kitchener, do we know offhand how many are curb-faced, how many kilometers of curb-faced sidewalk we have?
I don't know offhand, but we do have that data.
It'd be great to learn through email later. And I'm just also interested, I'm less identifying the need based on the calls and emails I get of having people find out where's my plow, but more along the lines of once my plow has come through, they are loading snow. The snow ends up right on my sidewalk, and so when's that? How can the city help me out with all these boulders on our sidewalk? That's a more complicated question, and it's often because of curb-faced sidewalks. And so I'm just curious if that is going to be something that we can try to address. Now I see on page 264 that one of the recommendations is to coordinate plow and sidewalk routes to avoid having to redo sidewalk sections, and I'm really interested to see how that might be possible, and hoping that staff would prioritize that as something to look at sooner than later. So I don't know if that's a question. Can we do it? Is it possible? It's a recommendation, but is it? Can it maybe? My question is this something that staff can consider looking at trying to coordinate for next winter?
I believe so. I think we can have the opportunity to use our GPS data to better plan and coordinate the routes and when staff are going out to be able to avoid having to redo those curb-faced sidewalks.
Okay, great. So then regarding the bike lanes, I have concerns about having bike lanes that then we close down every winter. Because our cyclists the hardcore cyclists especially, the winter cyclists, are going to want to use those bike lanes anyway, and it'll be very frustrating, in my opinion, to try to identify a core route that would anticipate the majority of winter cyclists. I don't see how on earth we would do that, and I think that's a dangerous avenue to take. And then also, I just wanted to ask maybe if we could consider looking at tapping the shoulder of the Innovation Lab or our tech community generally to see if there might be a product that we could, we could help. Well, we could ask for someone to invent that would replace salt. We've seen beet juice be used in different places, and I know that might not be ideal, but sand has been used, and that's not always ideal, but certainly there must be some new way of reducing the salt on our sidewalks, but also and reducing the slip and fall dangers. So I'm just wondering if that would be something to consider.
Certainly it's something that they can look into. We currently do use beet juice, and that we use salt is only effective up until minus 12 degrees, and then beet juice is used between minus 12 and minus 20, and then anything colder than minus 20 is when we use sand. So we do use a combination currently. One thing that I was looking for when I was doing some of my benchmarking information was what other products or other municipalities using, and it seems to be consistent that that's what people are using, but that's not to say that something new couldn't be invented either. So.
Yeah, let's put a challenge out there, give some form of a reward for a new invention, Waterloo region based. And then I guess just finally I want to ask that if we could see the list, once staff have prioritized all 75 recommendations, if we can see that list before the winter season of 2018-2019, so that council has a handle on where we're at with those recommendations.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Just following up on those 75 recommendations, are they listed anywhere? I was hoping we could see them all and let us decide which ones we're interested in.
I can provide them. Once we've got them prioritized, I can provide you with the whole list. We chose to focus on the ones that were of most interest to the public in this report, but certainly a lot of them are administrative in nature. A lot of them, there's a number of them that are continue doing X, Y, and Z. There's a number that are just housekeeping recommendations.
Well, that's fine. We can read over them. Are all the standards in now from the province? Do we have all the standards?
Yes.
And they are going to be for how long? How often do they change their standards?
Councillor Gazzola, the standards, just 2018 version, is the result of a 5-year review. So I would assume that these would be valid until 2023 at least.
Okay. What is the major change? What's the major
changes? So major changes are focused on active transportation. So as Karina stated in her presentation, where winter maintenance and inspections and monitoring of sidewalks during the winter were not included in the previous versions of the maintenance standards, they are now, as are the winter maintenance requirements for bike lanes. So those are the main changes. There were some other minor changes for average daily counts of traffic in classifications of roads, but nothing substantial.
But what do those changes really mean? What does it mean to monitor? What exactly are we going to have to do that's different?
So the maintenance standards are quite prescriptive in what they require for monitoring. So they require that between October 1st and April 30th, that 3 times a day or once a shift that the weather is monitored. So, and then pending the monitoring of the weather, the current weather and 24 hours forecast, if it is deemed that there might be an event of some kind or a snowfall or a chance of freeze and thaw for ice formation, that we have to monitor the sidewalks in that and treat as we deem fit.
Okay, treat as we deem fit.
Yes.
That's pretty broad.
Yes.
The other question I have, where can one see all of these standards? Is there a simple version of?
Yep, they're on e-laws right now. So if you look up OREG 23902, you'll be able to find them.
Yeah. What is the penalty for non-compliance?
I think I will, I don't know if I can speak to that. That would be more of a question for risk and legal.
Yeah. No, because I'm just curious. The province brings in all of these things, and have we had an opportunity to comment on all these changes, or are they just put in front of us?
No, certainly. I was actually part of a task force that provided comments on behalf of a neighboring municipality as well as City of Kitchener, and the region were actually very vocal in providing comments on the proposed standards that we have had in front of us for about 1.5 years. I think we've all been talking about these standards that have been coming. So yes, we have been able to provide our comments, and they did address some of our comments that we had.
Okay, did you win some things or not?
I think the standards will provide suitable protection for municipalities. So I think yes, we did. Our comments were heard.
Okay. Now, in the olden days, truck plows used to have the gates on them that they could drop when they came to a driveway. Where does that stand? That was a practice that we used for many years.
I believe you might be speaking about the gated plows.
Yeah, where they were on trucks too, not just on graders.
I'm not sure of the previous technology that was used. I do know that we did take a look, and previous management for City of Kitchener actually did an analysis of the technology that was available for having a wing or a plow that could be lifted up and down as you went through the driveways. And just because of the actual geometric configurations between our driveways, we don't have enough room. It would slow us right down, and we wouldn't be able to meet the actual level of service that we're providing today.
Well, they did it for many years. I understood that a reason it was eliminated was that it was costly for repairs to those particular vehicles. But I'm just, with so much improvement in our technology, I just wonder, is there any technology out there where this sort of thing works?
Did you look at I believe through Karina's work that you did look at all available technologies that are being used currently.
And there's no technology.
The ones that we came across were the ones that are attached to the graders. I didn't come across any that were attached to trucks, but it's not to say that they're not out there. I just didn't come across them.
Yeah, okay. Now, when you're looking at your study of windrows down the road, are you going to look at cleaning just the windrow or the whole ramp?
Well, right now, I think we aren't sure how we're going to take a look at windrows. My original thought would be windrows on its own. I'm not sure if we would be able to clean the ramps as well.
Okay.
But again, I guess that would be, it's for debate by council, and the level of service you can direct.
Okay, and from your indications here, you're looking at limiting it to older constituents and handicapped. Are you going to look at providing that service for the entire city? I'm not asking you to do it, but are you going to look at what the cost would be?
Again, I think that would be up to council to direct what you would like us to look at.
No, but you have to provide some information as to whether.
Yeah, I believe that's going to come back as part of the budget process.
Okay, but I'm asking that it comes back for a uniform service to everyone, as opposed to just they're going to just look at service, limited service. Where does that direction come from?
So the question is to staff, what will you be bringing back? So if I'm understanding correctly, Councillor Gazzola, full service for everyone, specialty service for those in need, not at all. Those are the three key ones, I suppose. I would presume all of those would be part of the budget process. Ms. McGolder, do you want to take that?
Yeah, through Chair Davey. So as Karina mentioned, staff have to go away and look at the recommendations and prioritize the actions. One of the things in terms of windrows we will be bringing forward next week relates to the sidewalk maintenance program and the partnership grant. And so that's one of the ways that we would like to evaluate a windrow program. What I'm hearing today through discussion is that there's a desire to also have staff evaluate what a citywide windrow program could look like, and that's certainly something that we could look at as next steps. In terms of the budget process, and this is something we need to have a conversation about in terms of which budget year a windrow program would move forward. We are recommending through the partnership grant with the winter sidewalk maintenance program next year piloting or testing that program, and I'd be looking for direction in terms of whether staff should bring forward as part of this year's budget process a more comprehensive windrow program, or if we should wait for the outcome of that winter sidewalk maintenance program. Perhaps that's a discussion for next week.
I was going to say just that, yes, so we should probably save that for next week. Okay, and finally we have Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I'm very interested in the GPS technology, and I know it's been very helpful for me when I've gotten calls from citizens about the work that's been done on their street. It's been able to show the speed of the plow, if the plow was down, if any salt was being administered to the street as well. And I do share the concerns in, if someone sees the plow on a priority 1 road and their residential street intersects with it, it's hard to understand that, well, they were right here, why didn't they just count at my street? I'm wondering if there might be, and you may not be able to answer this, but technology within the GPS system that would code the streets, that would show, okay, you know, this is priority 1, you're priority 2, and maybe, have a little button to press on the app that would explain that.
And that's something that they need to look into. What are the capabilities of our current GPS system?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fernandez?
Yeah, I had just 2 more questions. On page 259, when you were talking about the wing person pilot, the last recommendation was working with the union to implement this further. You also used that kind of statement when we were talking about the staff learning the routes and whether they should be familiar with through the summer and winter. You said something that we needed to work with union. Is that something you can answer publicly about what does that mean?
I think we just need to maintain good labor relations with the staff and with the union group. Involving them in some of the decisions that affect them will help to keep that relationship in good stead.
Okay. That was kind of a political answer, but okay. I can ask that offline then. I just, and more of a comment than a question, cycle lane closures. throughout the winter would be very concerning for me. I am not a winter cyclist, but we've heard time and time again through our Cycling and Trails Advisory Committee that more opportunity to cycle through all seasons is needed, warranted, and requested, rather than closing.
And I'd just like to make a comment too about where our thought process was going on this one, is that because these standards are new and there's so much that needs to be done for sidewalks and bike lanes, we're not going to be able to accomplish everything in the first year. So if we could start by saying, well, what is the core route? Let's make sure that we got those bike lanes cleared in the timeframes that they're supposed to be, and then look towards other bike routes as well. The comment about making a bylaw to officially close the other routes is just to limit our liability in terms of, we're saying officially that we're not going to winter maintain these yet.
Okay, I used the word warranted and I meant wanted. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a couple more in the queue. Councillor Gazol?
Just a quick, all our streets are prioritized now, right?
The streets are, yes.
And that's a static thing. That doesn't change.
I don't know. Does your priorities change?
Fairly
They're
static.
Yeah.
Pardon?
They are static, yes.
Yeah. So those can easily be referred to right now by anyone. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
Yes, I don't have questions, as good questions have already been asked. Can I just make a comment?
There's no one in the queue. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I agree with some of the other comments or questions already made, that we do need to best use whatever technology that we have in better informing our residents. I understand there could be complexities in giving false data, especially if with the GPS, and if it's, that plow is dedicated for a different area that's close proximity to whoever's checking that information. But we have our city really well mapped out. We know our equipment, we know the distances, we have the GPS data. At the very least, we could have a counter showing someone living in this area, how long will it take, approximate, giving a half hour, 1 hour, whatever the case may be, window. It's not this council's job to really pinpoint what that technology is or how it would be coordinated, but I think this is kind of the sentiment that's being given, that we do need to set a strong priority of having good information in the winter time to our residents. I think that's the very least that they are expecting. So I look forward to seeing what staff can come up with that. The other is aspect of the windows. I would agree that I think it's best that we have a all-encompassing report that doesn't just look at providing some assistance to seniors or those with the disabilities, but we look at the citywide program, the very least knowing what that cost will be, so that the council can have a more higher objective view and seeing if that's an extra level of service that we do want to provide. So I look forward to getting that information. And I'm sure there are some cities, from what I understand, I think City of Vaughan may have something like that as a program, that are a comparable size, and that should give us a better idea. Outside of the research that you may have already done and seeing what technologies exist, the very least reaching out to those municipalities and seeing maybe they're doing something differently that's outside data that may be available online. I think that would be good part of the consultation and preparation of the information that comes back to council. So I'm not saying other audit reports aren't interesting, but this one was really interesting. So,
Councillor Marsh?
They're all interesting, aren't they? So I do have another question I thought of later. I understand that we perhaps need to speed up the plows when there's a high level of snow, and I'm just curious, under what is our policy at the present time when we need to go faster than our current standard? Is it 15 kilometers an hour that a plow is supposed to go on a priority 2 or 3 road?
I'm not aware of a specific policy of a speed limit, an upper speed limit. I can certainly check in to see if there is one. What I know is that certainly we're governed by the speed limits that are posted on the roads.
Oh, goodness.
Right?
Yeah. You wouldn't want a snowplow going
right. So,
that fast. No.
And what they do is they try to, it's a fine line. If it's heavier snow, they do have to go a little bit faster to actually get it off the roads, but they try to pile it on that curb. So it is a finesse, and certainly from my experience, the trucks are loud. They sound like they're going faster than they actually are. Right. So, and that's when we look at the GPS and we actually communicate that to a resident. They're like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was going that slow, right?
So we don't have a speed limit of 15 kilometers an hour or
not
something
that I'm
like that?
aware of. I can check into that. I haven't heard of it.
Oh, you know, in communicating with staff from the contact center, that, I don't know, there were numbers thrown around, but that's good to know, that's good to clarify. So then I'll keep you here, Ms. Lisk, just another question. So regarding those curb-face sidewalks, I understand that you don't want to add your whole fleet a whole bunch of graders with those gates, but would it be a consideration of staff among all the different considerations to think about adding to the fleet one grader with a gate that would be specific for curb-face sidewalks, streets that have curb-face sidewalks?
Certainly everything's a consideration as we go forward here. And I would take a look at operationally if that's something, the curb face sidewalk, obviously the gate would have to be elevated onto the curb rather than what we were looking at was just actually at the same road elevation to clear windrows. But now if you're clearing snow piles on a sidewalk, then it's a different elevation. So you have to take a look at the actual limitations of the actual equipment.
Well, I guess I shouldn't really dabble in trying to figure out what the solution is. Just if we can please look for a solution for curb face sidewalks. I think I've already made that point. So sorry to hit it over the head. That was all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Just a comment. I just wanted to say I really appreciated this report. Green, a lot of good numbers and information here helped us. It certainly helped me understand the issue better, both in both of the audit parts there. I just wanted to also offer too, informally, I won't be upset if it doesn't happen, but I would be more than happy to sit down with staff as they go through this GPS process to because I sort of understand the technologies behind it, so I could set some level of expectations. So the offer's out there. If it happens, great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of great work went into this report, and between this one and the one that we're going to be talking about next Monday, it's clearly a lot of great work has gone into it, and they're not easy subjects, but the more factual information we have only increases the chances of making better decisions as a council going forward. Okay, so with that, thank you, Ms. Tasker, and we will go